Welcome to today's Health and Safety at Work presentation, and today we're looking at fire safety. Just a couple of introductions first. My name is Dom Greenwood. I'm a Senior Health, Safety and Environmental Management Consultant, but a big part of my job is national safety training. And as you can see from there, I do health and safety, fire, food, first aid, safeguarding and mental health. So I really enjoy talking about this kind of stuff to groups of people. And I'm going to be your main presenter today. Sat in the background, which I'm very grateful for, is Rebecca Johnson, who's our marketing manager, but is also going to be providing technical support, and she's going to be running the various polls that we do throughout the webinar. And should anything go wrong, I will be looking to her to make it go right. So welcome to Rebecca as well. At the moment, everybody is in listen-only mode. As you'll appreciate, there's a number of people on the webinar, and more people will probably join throughout the session, so everyone's on mute. If you'd like to ask a question, that's the panel to do so. However, what we have found over the last few webinars, we tend to get so many that what we do now is take the questions in and then provide a Q&A document and send that out with any notes and the presentation at a later date, generally within 7 days. So don't worry if we don't get to the question. We will broach that and send out a response when we send out all the other documents with reference to the webinar. That's a bit whizzy, isn't it? I like that. Agenda. So what we're going to talk about, well, obviously it's all to do with fire. We're going to talk about why you need to know about fire and the impact it has on businesses and people, the statutory compliance around fire and what law and legislation there is. Obviously, you'll be aware of the document called the Fire Risk Assessment, who can do that, what it actually does, what it stands for and how it works. The various different fire classifications, how to extinguish those fires and what fire extinguishers are available, what training is available that we can offer or other providers can potentially offer, various different signposting links that you can look at to to share with your workforce or for yourselves, and then how can we as an organisation help you understand fire a bit better and potentially help raise some resilience on about fire in the workplace. So that's what we're going to talk about over the next kind of 45, 50, 60 minutes, whatever that might be. So fire, you absolutely need to know about it. I teach this course or a version of this webinar along, this is largely the first hour of the level 2 fire safety course. And it's always an eye-opener to everybody on the course when we start putting these stats up and various pictures up and the impact it has on UK businesses, because in that particular year, the Fire and Rescue Service in England attended around 152,500 actual fires. So these weren't false alarms, these were actual fires in premises and property in the UK. Interestingly, just short of 63,500 what we call primary fires, and the fires are split down into different categories, and all these stats are available on the gov.uk fire report that comes out a couple of times a year, and I've got a link there at the end if anybody would like to go onto it. But primary fires would be in dwellings where people live, other buildings, so it could be farm buildings, garages, whatever it might be, vehicles, and in the open as well. So these generally aren't workplace fires. There's 64 or 63,500 primary fires. Interestingly and unfortunately, these incidents resulted in around 272 fire-related fatalities, and in brackets 208 dwellings. And there is a massive cohesion between fire fatality in the home more than the workplace, and that would be because at home we don't generally have potentially fire alarms, emergency lighting, fire risk assessments. We don't really do fire training with our families, and if you do, that's absolutely great. We don't have emergency action plans. We probably don't get electrics tested or gas safe and things like that. So all the different fire controls that you'd have in the workplace, we probably wouldn't have in the home, or only a minor amount of. We're also far more relaxed at home. We also do things probably a little bit differently at home with regards to cooking, candles, fire, DIY tools, things like that. So it's absolutely worth thinking about what you do at home with regards to fire as well. But there was also nearly 6,500 non-fatal casualties as a result to fire, burns, maybe slips, trips and falls, smoke inhalation, that type of stuff. Just over or around 3,000 businesses every year have a workplace fire. So that to me seems like quite a high number. I work with around 40 clients across 13 different sectors across the UK. And over the last 2 years, I know of at least 3, if not 4 of those that have had quite minor fires and one more of a major fire. But, out of a portfolio of 40 clients, I've had around 10% that have had a fire over the last year. UK insurance are paying out around £3.5 million every day to pay for fire damage, with an estimated £8.3 billion to our economy. So you haven't got to be any kind of great mathematician to work out the impact that's having on not only businesses, but also think about insurance premiums, funding, and all that kind of thing. It's, fire is a major problem. Interestingly, the fire service attended 577053 incidents up until March this year, and an incident could be anything from a road traffic collision to maybe a fire. So all in all, they're attending just shy of 600,000 incidents a year. We've already talked about the fire-related fatalities, but interestingly, as we said earlier, and this backs up what I was saying, 82% of fire-related fatalities were in dwellings. And there's just some other stats there, just to finish off this piece, around the different sectors: hospitals, education, premises, shops, industrial sites, with some of the numbers there. So if you think about workplace fires, construction sites and farms, engineering premises, retail are quite high on the list. There is a link there, and I appreciate it's a long link, which we're happy to send out. This is a publicly available document. The gov.uk website has got statistics for fire and rescue services on there, and I access it quite a lot because I use a lot of the statistics. It's quite interesting and tells you exactly what the fire and rescue services have attended and where the fires generally are. So it's quite interesting. So if you want to take a snapshot of that now, you can do. If not, we will send that out as well. Arson. So the National Fire Chiefs Council cited that arson was just over half or 50% of the fires they attend. So if you think about your workplace, and you have a fire, it's likely that half the time it could be arson. So it's absolutely worth thinking about the site safety of your workplace, where you put waste and storage of items, chemical safety, any flammable materials out of the way of anybody that could potentially get onto that site. So this is the single largest cause of fires attended by the emergency services, and so absolutely shouldn't be overlooked by employers. So arson, and certainly new assessments I'm writing and emergency action plans, we're thinking about how could arson be affected if somebody was to get into the site with doors and waste and storage. Thinking also about faulty electrical equipment. Electrical fires are particularly hazardous as they can't be put out with water, we all know that. Interestingly, an electrical fire can then spread through not only the appliance, but can go through the electrical system. So it's absolutely worth thinking about, loose wires, faulty connections, overworked plugs, and we're going to talk about extension cables shortly as well. Mentioned a few minutes ago about flammable materials. It's always worth looking around the site, and if you're on site on a regular basis in the workplace, some of the things that you're used to seeing may not be as much of a priority as if I was to come on to the site or somebody else. It starts to become like wallpaper because you're seeing the same bottle of, I don't know, acetone on the shelf every day, whereas it really should be packed away in a chemical store. So maybe think about doing a site walk round, maybe take some other colleagues with you to see what could be arsonable, faulty equipment, and maybe flammable materials. Where are they stored? How are they used? Lids, are they labelled properly? And who's using them? And the fourth one that the fire service talk about is employee error. So we all make mistakes, but fires can be caused by employees if they're not trained properly, if they don't understand how equipment or tools work, how chemicals are stored, leaving fire doors open, not setting alarms properly, leaving security gates open. So it's absolutely worth going back to staff and thinking, what training have they had, and also are they competent to do the job that you're asking them to do. Just a couple of examples, really. I live quite close to Peterborough, so I was quite keen on sharing this one. What could this mean for you in your workplace? So the Hot Point factory was set ablaze by 5 teenagers, and you can quite clearly see what's happened there. The blaze caused around £2 million worth of damage on the 29th of August. I think it was 2 years ago. after a row of 48 lorry trailers were set alight. 48 lorry trailers were, again, you haven't got to be a mathematician to work out not only the cost of that, but just the disruption in replacing those trailers, what was in them, if there was deliveries to go out the following day, people aren't going to get what they ordered, and all that kind of thing. Massive insurance job there. Big environmental cost as well. If you look at the amount of toxic smoke and fumes that's being let out over the local area. So the fire at the Hot Point factory in Shrewsbury Avenue damaged or destroyed 48 trailers. That cost for around £2 million. I use this one as an example on my fire training course, and there's a really good video available on YouTube. This was caused by gas canisters or gas bottles in the cellar that exploded. Not quite sure why, but this is a Grade 2 Edwardian or Georgian hotel, as you might know, the Claremont Hotel on the Eastbourne seafront, and the whole of the hotel had to be evacuated. No loss of human life, which was amazing. But again, you can quite clearly see the roof is gone. But many of the period features in the hotel, the mouldings, the fixings, the statues, the chandeliers are now gone as well. So, you know, fire has got no respect for anybody, and it will basically disregard anything in its path. So that hotel has had to be rebuilt. I'm not sure what the cost would have been, but it would be significant millions to get that back to its former glory. Another one there. The reason I put this one up is because we're based in Northamptonshire, so I thought it was interesting to find an example there. But again, a bed shop that caught on fire. Again, you can see the roof's gone, the fire inside the premises. It started in the basement and has come through. So whether it was an electrical fault, I'm not quite sure. But again, that business is potentially gone. Will it ever recover? Potentially not. We've got so many other things against at the moment with energy prices and cost of living and COVID and everything else, that the last thing you want is a fire. So please check your premises and all that kind of thing as well. Now, these photos are mine. In my previous role before I joined HR Solutions, I was head of compliance for a fitness company. So my day job really was going to a different gym on a different day and undertaking health and safety audits, fire safety audits, and undertaking training. And I had a kind of 110 gyms across 5-6 different countries that I would look after. And this is a picture that I took in a storeroom. For whatever reason, they've taken the door off, which is never really a good idea because you're taking away a barrier for smoke and flames, should there be one. But you can also see in the corner, you've got electrical inlet boards, you've got the gas pipe, because you can see the red pipe with the yellow sticker on it. But you've got loads of combustible materials in the foreground there, whether it be cardboard boxes, equipment. You know, the whole thing is just a disaster really, because storage is not being used properly, things aren't being stored away, but also you've got utilities and services there. So think about your storage areas and how that could be affected should there be a fire. Again, this is a supermarket or a small, yeah, it is a supermarket, but it's not a massive kind of Tesco's, it's a smaller one. But again, thinking about the boxes that are piled up there by the fire exit. Again, that's now a finable, prosecutable offence should the fire authorities come around. So thinking about waste management, I get that if there's a delivery and they're stacking shelves, it's got to go somewhere, but it's not in front of a fire exit. So think about how you would do that if you're in a sector like that. That was originally, as you'll appreciate, an extension barrel or extension drum. We've all got these. They're brilliant. You get them out when you're hoovering or in the garden doing the hedges or the grass, whatever it might be. But on this occasion, there was a piece of equipment running off that really shouldn't have been. It was drawing far too much power. And because the cable was still inside the drum, it was heating up more and more and more, and eventually melted the drum and caused a small fire. So again, if you're using extension cables, whether they be the block ones or the drum ones, make sure that you've got the ones that will accept the power that is needed. And always use the switched ones with maybe the earth port on them. Spend a bit more on them because you do absolutely get what you pay for. Because if you don't, you're going to have this situation. And I think there's probably in excess of 10 or 12 plugs there across 3 or 4 different extension cables. And there's even one being run out of the picture, as you can see. So these are generally left on at night when everybody's gone home, between the hours of 5:30 and maybe 9 in the morning. These are still drawing power because things are being left on, whether it be phone chargers, computers, PCs, kitchen equipment, whatever it might be. So this is an absolute no-no for distribution of power. Again, we've got an issue there with things being left by the fire exit. Again, it's boxes and ladders and equipment and tools. Shouldn't happen. And that isn't a picture of mine. I've used that because it was on a course I was on, but it was a chemical delivery that was left in the sun and unfortunately caught on fire. So again, thinking about your deliveries and thinking about what we're doing with chemicals. Just a few more there. Again, leaving fire doors open. Quite regularly see fire extinguishers used as door stops. We've all done it. I know I have. Not anymore. But thinking about leaving fire doors open, they are fire doors for a reason. So let's keep them closed. Again, we've got the extension lead. We've seen that. Using tools in the workplace. Where are the sparks going to go? Where are those sparks going? Could they be going into a bin? Could they be going onto a rag that's got chemical on it? Could it go onto a person? Again, this is when I took in a fitness club. I saw the extension cable being put through the ceiling void next to the water pipe, but also with another extension lead coming off it. Just not the right thing to be doing. Stress on the cable. It's just not what we should be doing. And then in kitchens, you know, the chefs like to do their flambe and their fancy fire stuff, but if it gets too much, then this is going to happen. You've got flames there that will then go into the filters in that overhead extraction, and that can then move around the restaurant or wherever it might be. If no one's doing any kind of fire watch after the restaurant's closed, there could still be embers or smoke, hot smoke or flames in that extraction system. So absolutely, if you're from the catering industry, think about where your extraction goes and what the hot air and stuff that could go into it. And this was one of mine, and the reason I put this on there is because the fitness company I was talking to you about was called Energy Fitness, and the brand they had was called Fit for Less. And you can quite clearly see there that was a Fit for Less gym at one point, and I was made aware by my CEO that one of the clubs in Dundee was on fire, and could I get up there? And my response was, I can, but I'm 7 hours away. And what happened was, I think this photograph is fantastic, is that the fire officers are walking by. And this was arson, a young guy, young pyromaniac, over 5 days, set on fire the gym, the indoor market, the church and the school, and was found on day 5 trying to set another premises on fire. The reason I put this on there is because the devastation this caused the franchisee was massive, because I knew this guy quite well. He'd been on a lot of training courses with me. He never recovered. Equipment was damaged too much, staff records, staff property. Things weren't backed up as well. So a point I'm going to try and make here is back up everything in the cloud, records, statutory compliance, anything you've got that you don't want to lose, take a picture of it and back it up, because this guy hadn't done that. And so this was a massive disruption and a big problem for this particular franchisee, and they didn't recover. So this will take us to our first poll. I'm going to hand back to Rebecca, and the question would be, after what you've just heard, after the pictures you've seen, after some of the conversations we just had, do you feel that fire safety is taken seriously in your workplace? And I'll hand over to Rebecca to run the poll.
Thanks, Dom. So I'm just launching it now, so you should all be able to see it in your screens. Just be aware that once you're voting, it doesn't always work in full screen mode, so you may need to minimize your screen in case you have any issues with that. We've got a lot of votes coming in. We'll just wait a couple more seconds. Okay, I think the scores have just about settled now, so we're looking at, it's still changing, so I'll give it a couple more seconds. Yeah, we've got 67% have voted yes and 33% have voted no.
Brilliant. Well, thanks everybody for voting, and for the 67% of you, great to hear. Really pleased that you think that fire safety is being taken seriously. That's great. Keep doing whatever you're doing, because it's obviously working. For the 33% of you that said no, I guess the response would be is what can be done? Is it a conversation with management? Is it a conversation with the board? Is there funds that need allocating to make fire safety taken a bit more seriously? Is it training? Is it fire controls, things like that? So it might be worth thinking about what it actually is that you feel is missing. And again, we're happy to help with that. We've got various different tools we can help with that, or it could be a conversation. But, you know, please don't sit back and think, well, it's not being taken seriously. Please act upon that, because it obviously is important. We're going to spend a bit of time now on the legislation and the law. So the Fire Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order is the primary piece of UK legislation that looks after fire. Whilst it is mentioned obviously in the Health and Safety at Work Act, this was a separate piece of legislation that went in, well, a good few years ago now, but 2005. It's also known as the Fire Reform Order or the Fire Safety Order because it's quite a long title. Where does it apply? All places that people go for work or leisure. So it doesn't apply to, and there's 6 exceptions there, domestic premises. Now, what that doesn't mean is you can start doing silly things in your garage, maybe, I don't know, making things that are highly flammable, because that could then be a criminal offence. But it affects workplaces rather than your home. However, what I would say is we are now more in a culture with home working, as you'll appreciate. So your home could now be classed as a workplace, depending on what you do. So just think about how fire safety could be affected there. Offshore installations, they've got their own legislation, ships and railways, licensed vehicles, mines. So there's a number there that aren't covered under the regulation, but it's because they've got their own similar regulations. Who's responsible for delivering it at work? Well, it's the head of establishment, which could be the owner or a CEO type person, but it also could be the nominated competent person. And what I do find quite regularly is that you'll have an owner or a CEO or MD that's maybe got a site safety manager or an operations manager or a competent person that looks after all the health and safety and fire safety. Now, what that doesn't do is make them unaccountable or unresponsible. It just means there's somebody else that's helping to deliver the components and regulations available. So you need to think about working together. There's a number of different user guides available, and it's worth thinking about which one is pertainable to you. So you've got offices and shops, factories and warehouses, and the list kind of goes on. And it's almost a cross section of our working sector. Interestingly, when I worked for the fitness company, we would fall into Guide 6, small and medium places of assembly. It's absolutely worth thinking about where you would fit into that. And then by going onto the link, the government collections fire safety law documents, you could then click on one of those guides and it gives you a free downloadable user guide that helps you understand fire safety in your sector. It is free. Please do look at it because it gives you a template fire risk assessment. It gives you various other documents, training tools, some statistics. So it's absolutely worth looking at that to see what you might need to do in your sector. Now, what I would say is I wouldn't suggest anybody doing a fire risk assessment unless you've been trained to a fire risk assessor standard or you're a competent person. It just gives you an idea of some of the things that need to be looked at on a kind of weekly, monthly basis, and some of the different hazards and risks in the workplace with reference to fire. So maybe think about the different user guides with response to the industry that you're in. Again, you'll appreciate the Act is quite long, so I've tried to break it down into the different legal duties for the employer. Number one, as we just talked about, is nominating people for special roles. So that could be a fire safety officer and or a fire warden. I tend to find bigger companies would have maybe a site safety manager, for instance, or a safety director who would assume this more strategic role as a fire safety officer. Then under that person would be a number of maybe fire wardens or fire marshals. So if I think about one of my clients that's a carbon manufacturer and they kind of make parts for Formula One cars and planes and things like that, they've got a site safety manager who would assume the role of fire safety officer. And then across their kind of 13 or 14 different work areas, they've got a number of different fire wardens that would report into this person. Number two, consult employees about these people, so they need to know who you are and any improvements in fire safety. If you're sharing a premises, interestingly, you need to inform the other employers there of any significant risks. So maybe if there's a building and there's 4 or 5 different companies in there, you need to talk to each other and let them know what you do, or if there's any risk to their business because of the practices and procedures that you've got. So the people in control of a premises are responsible for the part of the building they occupy. It's always worth going back to the landlord to decide if he or she wants to complete the fire risk assessment for the whole building, or do they want you to do just your section. So I regularly do fire risk assessments. Sometimes I'll just do one area, other times I'll do the whole building. So think about talking to your landlord or landlady about that. You have to establish a means of contacting the emergency services. And I always say, what happens at 5:30 when you guys go home, or 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock? What happens to the fire safety and the alarm? And quite oftenly it's, well, nothing, because we come back in the morning. Most fires happen between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. Certainly if it's arson or something's been left on, it won't be seen if you're not there. So have you got any kind of out of hours monitoring system, maybe a red care kind of system, a monitoring system from a third party, that should the alarm go off, the alarm company can then raise the alarm, or at least raise the alarm to a managing director, a site safety manager? Because what we don't want is that building catching on fire and no one knows about it, or we're just hoping somebody walks by. So establishing a means of contacting the emergency services 24 hours a day. And employees have to cooperate with you as the employer to make sure that workplace is safe from fire. So things like smoking, chemical management, vehicle management, things like that. And certainly if you've got any kind of policy on smoking or chemicals, employees need to make sure that they are working in partnership with you and doing what the policy suggests. The legislation asks you as the employer to develop certain areas, and one of those would be an emergency plan. And that's a little bit more than just the blue and white kind of fire assembly plan on the back of the door. It would cover all different things like chemical spillages, a terrorist attack maybe, vehicle malfunction, fire obviously, gas leaks, things like that. So it's worth going back to think about, have we got an emergency plan? And if we have, is it sufficient? And do people know about it? So I see regularly great emergency plans that are in folders, but unfortunately none of the staff have ever been shown it. They don't know where it is, and no one has ever practiced what we would do should there be a gas leak. So, you know, don't just make it a paper exercise, make it a living and breathing document. Business continuity plan. What would happen should there be a gas leak and you're out of your business for say 5 to 7 days? If there was a fire, how would you fulfill customers' needs? Where would your cyber files go? So a business continuity plan, and there's a number of templates you can get, and we can help you with this, is a really good document to understand what would happen should everything go wrong. How can we still operate that business? And it's not just about fire, it could be any kind of emergency situation. Have you got adequate evidence training for things like fire wardens and fire marshals? So certificates, criterias, syllabus, things like that. Are you doing regular evacuation drills? In the legislation, it's every 6 months. I'm quite a fan of every quarter, but can you provide that documentation should you be asked? Have you got a folder with all the maintenance, building, emergency systems in there? Do you know how the fire alarm works, the emergency lighting, the boilers, for instance, the utilities, the shut-off valves, stuff like that? And is it all in some kind of folder or file of evidence? Because if you're asked by the HSE, an EHO, or a fireman or fire control officer, you're going to need to be able to provide that. So think about maybe getting some of this stuff together. So the last point there is, have you got these systems, documents, training and servicing in place? Not in 3 or 4 files across 6 different offices and in the boot of someone's car. Get it all together so that it's easily accessible. So a new piece of legislation, which is kind of in but isn't kind of in, it literally came out last year really as a response to Grenfell Tower, is the building safety, the fire safety bill, or the building safety bill. Was previously known as that, and the Fire Safety Act 2021. It got royal assent at the end of April, and we now know that it's going to be coming in full bore kind of from now and certainly next year. But it does mean that certainly landlords and building owners and any new buildings have to be looked at slightly differently. And there's a few points there that external walls of buildings and fire doors to individual flats or those located in common areas that have to be assessed as part of the build and as part of requirement for fire risk assessment. So certainly buildings, HMOs and high-rise buildings, they're being looked at very differently. From now on, the responsible person, we talked about that being the building owner, maybe a CEO, has the legal responsibility to commission the fire risk assessment. It can't be, well, you know, we'll do one next year. It needs to be done as soon as the building is built and people are going to be in there. Applies to all multi-occupied residential buildings, and it allows the fire and rescue service to enforce against non-compliance. So it gives the fire and rescue service far more power should they find prosecutable offences and issues with your fire safety in buildings. So it's worth thinking about the fire safety fire safety bill that's just come out. Complying with the new Fire Safety Act. If a building or manager can show compliance with the risk-based guidance, there is guidance that's come out. It follows different scenarios, but there are consequences of failing to comply, and it will be down to a risk-based guidance. It could be criminal prosecution, things like that. Actions you should take now would absolutely be to review your fire risk assessment. And if it's not suitable or sufficient, to put a new one in place and make sure it covers things like external walls, individual entrance doors. Just really bring it in line with the Act. So it's worth going back onto the gov.uk website and typing in Fire Safety Act 2021 or Fire Safety Bill 2021 and seeing how that could affect you. So there are some different signposting. So we've got the Fire Safety HSE, which would be hse.gov.uk. We've got Fire Safety in the Workplace, and we've got the Fire Safety Advice Centre, National Fire Chiefs Council as well. So there's a number of links there. We're going to move on to our next poll, when the question would be, do you have fire safety training at your workplace and qualified fire marshals? I'm going to hand back over to Rebecca for this one.
Thank you, Dom. So I'll launch the poll now. It should appear on your screens. So if you can vote yes or no to the question, and then we'll take a look at the results in a few seconds. Okay, the scores are still changing. Just give it a couple more minutes for everyone to vote. Okay, it looks like it's settled there then. So we've got 62% have voted yes and 38% have voted no. So some interesting stats there, Dom.
Yep, similar scores to last time, really. So again, for the 62%, thinking about fire safety training in the workplace and various qualified fire marshals, fire wardens, really good news. Again, keep doing what you're doing. Again, thinking about the 38% of you that haven't got that in place, let's think about why that's not in place and what you can do to make sure fire safety training is there. You know, there's various courses you can go on. Some are online, some are delegated. We can help with that if you want to get in touch as well. They're pretty inexpensive, but I'd absolutely advocate getting at least 2 fire marshals and wardens in a small business, in every department in a bigger business. And always someone on site, first aid and fire trained as well, because it's really important should anything happen there. But again, please feel free to contact us. We're happy to help. I mean, it goes on to what we're going to be talking about next. What is a competent person? A competent person is someone who's got sufficient training, qualifications, knowledge and experience in other qualities that allow them to assist the responsible person with health and safety matters. You may have to prove competence to a regulator or an enforcement officer if there was ever an event of an accident, an incident, allegation or legal proceeding. So I suppose the question would be at the moment is, have you got a competent person for health and safety and fire safety in the organisation? And again, this probably is the 62% of you that have said yes, that's amazing. But thinking about the 38% of you that might be saying no is how can you get that in place? Because this is a part of the legal duties under the not only the Health and Safety Work Act, but also the Fire Safety Reform Order as well. A big part of that Fire Safety Reform Order is the fire risk assessment, and you'll have heard that banded around. Fire risk assessment, it's a legal requirement if you're a building owner, employer, or the responsible person. It is a process. It is a document's completed. It is a serious undertaking. As I say, I probably do between probably 20 and 30 a year. Something quite simple premises, like an office or a shop, but other more of a more detailed premises, maybe an engineering company, maybe a leisure centre. I've done a few libraries recently, some MOD sites, schools, that type of thing, factories and warehouses. But it is a document that needs to be completed by a competent person, someone that's done relevant training. And it isn't just about what you can see. It's looking, in cupboards, looking in roof voids, looking in cellars, looking at documentation, training, looking at fire doors, looking at the general maintenance of the building, how chemicals are stored, and really what the fire risks and hazards would be in that organisation. So if you haven't got a fire risk assessment, I'd absolutely implore you to get one booked in. If you have got one, do you understand it? And if you don't, please go back to your assessor and ask them, I don't understand section 2.2 or the comment you've made there. Can you explain that? Because they should be able to do that. And if you have got one as well, make sure it's been reviewed annually. So it's not just a paper exercise. People need to understand it, because at the back generally would be an action or recommendations list, which you need to be aware of. What other things make up your statutory compliance and the fire safety regulations? Well, your fire alarm, has it been inspected thoroughly? And you can't do that yourself. You can check it weekly, monthly yourself to make sure it's working, the lights are on, you can start it, reset it, and all the different zones are coming on. But it needs to be checked every 6 months or inspected by a competent company, possibly the company that installed it. If not, there'll be plenty of fire safety inspection companies in your locality, and they'll give you a docket or a check sheet that you'll keep, that you can prove that it's been fully inspected on a 6 monthly basis. In the same way, the emergency lighting can be tested and checked daily and monthly, but it needs to be annually tested for 3 hours every year. And again, that needs to be a company that's competent, and it could be the company that does your fire alarm as well. But please make sure you've got your fire alarm being tested every 6 months, and your emergency lighting being done annually. In the same way, the fire extinguishers that you should have in and around the building need to be maintained in a good working order, with the responsible person carrying out maybe monthly visual checks, but also on an annual basis, a company coming in to check the tags, the pressure, the fluid, if there is any in there, and the general maintenance of the extinguisher every year. And again, it could be the company you've used for the previous 2 inspections, but it may be that you've got a different company. But please make sure, go back. Have you got this on a tracker? Do you understand when all of your fire statutory duties are coming into play? Fire drills and training, we touched upon this earlier. Fire drills are essential in any workplace or public building. They're also a legal requirement under the FSO 2005. You should carry out at least 1 fire drill per year and record the results. As I said, I prefer every 6 months, but have you got that down? Do new people understand how the fire alarm works and the fire drill? So what should the fire risk assessment actually do? Well, it should obviously identify potential risks and hazards and the different people that are at risk. So it should also include people external to your organisation, so visitors, contractors, maybe if you're in the leisure facility, personal trainers, for instance, class teachers, even consultants like myself when I'm going to proper businesses. It needs to be about who else is in the building and the different places they're going to be going. What action can you take to remove, there's a typo there, it should be remove or reduce risks. If I think about some of my clients, we can't remove the risk because they're dealing with fire, chemicals, things like that. But what control measures can we put in to remove those and safeguard people? What necessary precautions have we got to protect people from the risk and ensure people are aware of what they can do to prevent fire? So employees, we talked about smoking, chemical awareness, chemical storage, things like that. People need to be aware of their actions and what they might need to do at the end of the day, switching equipment off, moving equipment to a safe place, security, and then obviously arson prevention we talked about at the start of the webinar, where you leave your bins. I was with a client yesterday and their neighbour, which was a BT call exchange, burnt down 3 weeks ago, and it was from a wheelie bin that was set on fire early hours of the morning and then pushed towards the fence. The fence then caught fire, that then ran alongside the building and then went through a void or a filter or an external air vent, and then unfortunately now the whole building is caught on fire. So that was literally from a wheelie bin. So where your wheelie bin is stored, is it safe and secure? Think about site safety and what you can do to prevent arson. So the fire risk assessment must identify potential hazards, but also think about sources of ignition, sources of fuel and sources of oxygen. So think about where waste is kept, as we talked about. Fuel, and don't think of fuel as just kind of petrol or diesel, things like that. Fuel is anything that can burn. So combustible materials, wood, paper, chemicals, other different things that can burn, office products, kitchen appliances, things like that. You should identify the different people at risk, take action to evaluate, remove, or reduce risks, necessary precautions we've just talked about. But interestingly, further down there, your arson strategy, your emergency procedures, and your plan, inform, instruct, and training staff. So please take a picture of that, because that's really important what your fire risk assessment should do. And if you're reading your fire risk assessment and you don't think it does that, go back to the company that did it, because it may not be suitable or sufficient. So I'm going to hand back to Rebecca for our third poll, and the question 3 would be, no surprise, but do you have a fire risk assessment at work, and has it been reviewed? And I guess really, does it do all the things that I've just suggested it should do? So I'll hand back to Rebecca for question 3.
Thank you, Dom. I've just launched the poll now, so we're just looking for a yes or no answer on this one to learn a bit more about your fire risk assessments at work. Okay, we'll just wait for a couple more responses if you haven't voted yet. It's looking like it's going to be similar to the previous 2 polls, which is positive. Okay, brilliant. So we've got 73% have voted yes and 27% voted no.
Brilliant. Again, thanks everybody for voting. Do appreciate that. And it's good to see that 73% of you have got a fire risk assessment and it's been reviewed and you're happy with the content. Again, I'm going to go back to that 27%, which could be part of the previous two no percentages. But, you know, think about how you can get a fire risk assessment in place, engaging local companies to do that for you. You can talk to us as well. We've got a plethora now of fire risk assessors within Essential Safety that can come and help you with that. It's a legal duty, so please remember that. So if you haven't got one and there's an accident or a fire, you could be prosecuted for not having one. But equally, it is a really good document to understand where your fire risks are and what you need to do. So just thought I'd quickly run over the different classifications of fire for you, because there are 5 different classifications, and unfortunately, different fire extinguishers would extinguish different classifications of fire, with Class A being the most popular. I'm not sure that's the right word. I'm not sure any fire classification would be popular, but the most common. So wood, paper, cloth, rubbish and plastics would be Class A, and generally would be put out by a Class A fire extinguisher, which could be water, foam, or even dry powder. This one will be particularly nasty, flammable liquids. So think about your workplace. You know, do you have things like petrol, oil, grease, acetone, various different paints and solvents? So a Class B fire, you may not have that if you're more of a retail or shops or offices, but it could be you've got a Class B fire. And have you got the necessary fire extinguishers in place? Again, you may not have gas on the premises, and you certainly might not have things like propane or acetylene, but it could be you're using gas for things like, you know, acetylene cutting. You might have different processes in engineering and manufacturing that require different gas mixing and different gas production. And if that's the case, has your fire risk assessment picked that up, and have you got the right fire extinguishers in place to deal with that? Class D would be metals, various different metals, and again, I would be concerned if you've got things like uranium and plutonium, but there might be a legitimate reason why you would have various different metals on site, again with different chemical processes, engineering. But if you have got some of those, have you got the necessary fire extinguisher to put that out? One that was added to the classification more recently was Class F. And certainly if you've got a Class F fire, you might be in a commercial kitchen, so cooking fats, oils and greases need to be looked at differently. And there's a Class F fire extinguisher, which has got kind of a long wand on it, and is like a fluid that creates a crust over the top of the fat or the oil. Water in this situation is absolutely the worst thing that can be put on a fire, and it creates something that's called a BLEVE, which is a boiling liquid evaporating vapor explosion. And it basically creates a fireball of compressed air, which then moves the fire along, potentially through a roof void or filter. So and can create some sort of, like we said there, auto ignition. So think about a Class F fire extinguisher if you're in any kind of cafe, bakery, restaurant, hotel, or anything like that. And that's quite a nice slide there, because it talks about the nice acronym PASS. The way we use a fire extinguisher is to pull the pin out, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle, and sweep from side to side, with the various different fire classifications as a poster. And that poster you can get online. You can download that poster, and I think that's a great addition to any kind of staff notice board, site safety board, anywhere that staff can see the different classifications of fire, what they are, the symbols, and then the different extinguishers that could potentially extinguish those. And there is your fire extinguisher color code: water, dry powder, foam, CO2, and that's the class F one, the wet chemical fire extinguisher. The one that's missing, actually, and I don't know if it's me, apologies for just sweeping back through, is electrical fires. No, it's not there. So the other classification of fire would be electrical. It's not class E, even though you'd expect it to be, but an electrical fire is obviously dealt with in a different way. It's on there at the bottom. It can be used with dry powder or carbon dioxide. Again, you wouldn't use water because it would conduct the electricity. The first thing we're going to do there is switch the appliance off and then use a CO2 extinguisher. Interestingly, if you start to use different rooms in your premises for different reasons, and I was with a client about a year ago that they started to use a room as a server room, which was previously used as a multi-activity room. They still had the water extinguisher in there, and I was like, you need to swap that out for a CO2, because obviously you've now changed the use of the room, which the fire risk assessment wouldn't pick up. So it needs to be reassessed. I'm really keen on staff awareness, and I think visual is best, because you can show people, they can see pictures, you can then talk about it as well. And there's just a couple of pictures there, or posters there, that we've used. I think we've actually got the fire safety one in the middle in our workplace at head office, but also a number of my clients now use these. Fire safety over 6 different squares on the left. You've got the different classifications of fire. You've got different extinguishers and what to do in an emergency, and very similar in the middle there. Then you can then write the details of the fire safety officer on that one as well. And then the one on the very right would be fire marshals and first aiders. And again, it's great to see if you've got those in place and everybody knows who they are. And I really love that board there. That's called a fire point board. Often see these in and around construction sites, but I think these could be used in any sector. Talking about when the last fire drill was, the fire action notice, a fire blanket, all the different types of fire extinguishers, and who your fire marshals are. I've actually seen these on wheels before, with a couple of fire extinguishers beneath them on almost like a trolley, and they can be wheeled around different locations. But the fire point board, I think, is really, really good and quite inexpensive as well. Fire safety logbook. There's two different, well, actually three different options there. I really like the one that's in the kind of pouch on the right, because it keeps it safe. And some companies actually use the fire retardant metal boxes as well. But again, make sure these are filled in. Make sure you're doing the weekly checks, the quarterly checks, and somebody's appointed on the premises to do these. The last point I'd like to make really is we've talked very much about fire safety in the workplace, but as we know from the statistics that the gov.uk fire stat report presented, is that the vast majority, I think it was 82% of fatalities are in the home. And again, we know the whys and wherefores there, because we haven't got the fire safety controls in the home. But there's just a few points there that you can think about. If you've got children, talk to them about fire safety. Talk to them about what they would do should there be a fire. And again, the natural response is water extinguishes fire. But we already know that in the kitchen, which is where it probably could take place, and or electrics, that is the last thing we want to get them to do. So we need to educate them not to do that, and think about maybe putting fire extinguishers into the home, maybe in a cupboard, maybe in a hall cupboard, maybe in the garage, and show them how to use them. Again, very inexpensive. A fire extinguisher is £40 to £50. Why not do that? And that's the sort of same money that you're going to spend maybe on a takeaway, or going out for dinner or something. So think about maybe safeguarding the home. Plan your escape. So think about maybe running through, this is what we do should there be a fire here. And it's not about scaring the children, but it's about what could we do. Maybe turn it into a game. Maybe think about where you'd meet should there be a fire and you're at work and they're at home. Think about smoke detectors. Certainly now, if you're in a property that's rented from a landlord, there's now legislation to suggest that smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms should be present, and it's the landlord's responsibility to put those in. So if they're not there, please go back to your landlord. But equally, again, for less than say £20–30, you can put smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms into your home. Think about smoking. People still smoke, and if it's their home, that's their prerogative. But thinking about where you smoke, and also what happens to the extinguished cigarette once it's finished? If it goes in a normal waste bin, how is that looked after? Tools and DIY, think about, do you let them cool down, chemical safety, stuff like that. We're approaching that time of year again with bonfires and Christmas around the corner. Think about candles, naked flames and bonfires, petrol, chemicals, and then cooking as well. So it's just a little checklist there, fire safety. There is actually on the gov.uk website a really good fire safety at home resource that you can download, which I haven't got the link on here, so I do apologise, but there is that you can quite easily find that if you Google that. So further training and support. Have you thought of training your staff to understand fire safety, looking at embedding the fire safety policy and knowing what to do if there's an incident or emergency? You'll know the answer to that, so think about that, ponder that. We can help you organise a fire safety awareness training, 2-3 hour session, or we can run level 2 safety cert regulated courses, the first hour of which you've kind of gone through today. We can help you develop fire safety and emergency plans, forms and check sheets, and we can also conduct fire risk assessments where you need to allow really a day, maybe a day and a half to get that done properly. There's a number of ways we can help support you as well. There's some further signposting there. We talked on some earlier, but you've got the HSE, that's the #1 place to go. And we talked earlier, the government fire safety information and the fire safety guides that we talked about earlier. The Chief Fire Association is really good. You don't have to be a member of that. There's loads of documents on there. Fire Safety Advice Centre and the Fire Industry Association. So there's a number of free documents on all of those. Take a screenshot of that, or even Google some of those, because if you're looking for documents or policies or just some advice, these would be the first places to go. Equally, we're happy to talk to anybody as well. As we said earlier, questions, please send those in to us, because we're going to put those into a Q&A document and send that out. I'm going to hand over to Rebecca for our last poll, where she's going to talk to you about maybe any further services that you may require. I'd like to thank you all for being part of the webinar today. I'm going to hand back to Rebecca for the 4th poll.
Thank you, Dom. Yeah, so just following on the back of what Dom said, we can support you with fire through training or through risk assessments, or for other areas of health and safety, or indeed HR. If you'd like to find out any more, just select one of the options on the polls and we can get in touch following the webinar. Just let that run for a couple more seconds, and then we've just got a few more slides on the the next webinars that we've got in this series, and then also some training courses that we're running over the next couple of months as well. Okay, brilliant. I'll hand back over to you then, Dom, for that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got some more webinars coming up. We generally run these monthly. We've got managing a successful return to work in September, along with safeguarding, which is the next one I'm looking at safeguarding the workplace, how you deal with maybe vulnerable people, things like that. Managing an effective redundancy program in October, and then working with trade unions in November. So please save your spot. There's the link there for upcoming webinars. I'm pretty sure if you're on this one, you've seen that before. We like to run the ILM courses, and we've got a new tranche starting in September. Level 3 starts on the 7th. So if you're interested in that, it's an online course. Terry, our trainer, is excellent. He gets really good feedback. So it'd be great to get you involved in level 3 and level 5. So we're now doing the Management and Leadership Award. Again, starts in September. You'll see there's extra dates there. These are very popular. So if you want to get involved with these, please do contact us, and we can let you know how they work and the cost of those. And I'm running a couple of courses in October and November. So we're running mental health first aid. I'm finding I'm doing more mental health first aid courses. I also do an online ambassador course as well, which is 2 hours, or this course, which is delegated, which is a 6-hour course. And again, I'm doing level 2 health and safety in November, which is delegated as well. So again, it'd be great to have as many people on board as possible. Please contact us with reference to how that works, the costs, and all the details around that. If you'd like to send any further questions in, then we'd be great to receive those. There's our phone number there. There's always someone manning those lines. But equally, if you want to visit our website or send in a question or an inquiry, we'll pick that up and get back to you with reference to whether it be a webinar, a training event, or any support that you might need. We always value your feedback. So whether it's good or bad, if it's bad, then we'll obviously look at why it is bad. If it's great, we'll take that as well. So thank you in advance. But again, if you'd like to send through any feedback, we'd love to hear it, because we like to make these webinars as interesting and as informative as possible. And the last thing really for me to say, and you'll be pleased to know that I've finished 4 minutes early, so you can go and get your lunch now, as can I, is thank you. We love doing these webinars, and it's great to get a number of people on, and hopefully it's making a difference. So thank you for attending. Thanks to Rebecca for the technical support and running the polls. And hopefully I'll see some of you again next month for the safeguarding webinar. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.